Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi the Mai Pei Gimel Halacha Dalit. We are on the top of Daf Lamed Aleph, Mamash, all the way in the top. And let's share a few words of introduction that will explain some real new ideas, new halachas that we are not yet familiar with, that are very much connected to today's Daf, to Daf Lamed Aleph. First of all, it was common that Yidden, Jews, and Oivdei Avodah Zarah, we're speaking about in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we're speaking about after the times of the Beis Hamikdash, in Eretz Yisrael, after the Roman occupation, where we had idolaters that were farmers, that were goyim, that owned land in the Holy Land. Anyways, Yidden and goyim would deposit the produce in storehouses. Guys understand this business. And the storehouse manager would sell their produce. The buyers would not know whether they bought it from a Jew or whether they bought it from a goy. This was a common practice. So now the question is, the buyer, the chavin, what does his presumption need to be? If the halachic presumption, guys, will be that the produce was originated by a Jewish farmer, we're speaking about the roiv of the Yidden were Amaratzim, so then the presumption is that the produce is the Mai. If the produce was from the goy, so then the produce will be tevel. So the question is, what do you do when you buy produce from such a storehouse? So there is a machlokes between Avnei and the Chachamim. Now, before we go on, just to be aware that in Yavne, the majority of the farmers were kutim. And yes, again, to speak out, there's a machlokes tanoim, whether kutim have a din, have a status of a Jew, whether they have a status of a goy. Our sugya is going to follow the shita that kutim have a status of a goy. Okay, so this was a common occurrence in Yavne. This type of business was where roiv of the people that would store the produce would be halachic goyim. Let me just share the opinions between Avmeir and the Chachamim. That's foundational for the first half of the Daf. That Avmeir holds, you follow the majority. If the majority of the people are idolaters, then the person who buys the produce presumes it came from the roiv, tevel. If the majority of the people, the farmers that store their produce in the storehouse are Yidden, then the buyer presumes that it's the Mai. And if it's exactly 50-50, Mechzal Mechzer have made as Machmin, and he says tevel. The Chachamim have a very lenient opinion. The Chachamim hold that even if there's only one Jew that deposited his produce in the storehouse, there are 1 million non-Jewish farmers. All of it is treated as you bought one, and you bought one. Could be the one that you bought for us, the Jewish one, you treat it as the Mai. And we're going to really understand today, why are the Chachamim so lenient? Now, the first premise, the first explanation in the Chachamim will be, Meir, that Rav Meir holds ein kinyan l'goy lahavkiya, which means that Jewish farmers' produce is inherently obligated biblically to be tithed. So he's more machmir. The Chachamim hold, that will be the explanation, that the non-Jewish ownership in the Holy Land affects the kedusha of the land. It downgrades the kedusha of the land. It removes the biblical obligation to tithe. Yes, there is an obligation midrabanan. There is an obligation rabbinically, but therefore the Chachamim have the right to be very lenient. The whole thing to begin with is only midrabanan. That will be the explanation of why the Chachamim are going to be so lenient. Now, all of that will be really an intro to the understanding of our Mishnah. We concluded our Mishnah, Halacha Dalet. We spoke about it yesterday. What would happen if a Jew deposits his produce, David, a chaver, in the hands of a goy? The goy is a shomer. So do we say, the Tanakama, that the owner, the shomer, exchanged tevel, vadai, or Rav Shimon, maybe he exchanged the Mai? Will the Chachamim of our Mishnah have to go only according to Rav Meir, who holds that ein kinyan l'goy lahavkiya, which is why they're so machmir? Not maybe he exchanged, for sure he exchanged. Or will we be able to say that the Chachamim of our Mishnah even follows the Chachamim of this conversation over there by the Jew and the Goy and the farmer and the storehouse, that The whole Trumas Umaisvis is only midrabanan when it's owned by a goy, and still the Chachamim will be so machmer. But what will be the logic behind that? And what we will be megala today is something unbelievable. Now, really, the authors of this debate will be Rabbi Yosef Rab Chanina and Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yosef Rab Chanina is the shita that we have been following all the way up until now. That what? That even though Kedusha Rashoina, Kitchela Shaita, Kitchela Asadav, which means that when Nebuchadnezzar, the evil king, exiled us because he conquered the Holy Land, the Kedusha was removed. But when we resettled it, when the oily bubble resettled it, that's the way we were learning until now. They imbued the land with the sanctification. Ezra imbued the land with the sanctification. And from then onwards, we're mechuyev to take off Trumas Umaisves Midoy Raisa, where Yidden settled. That was what we learned until now. We will today introduce the Shita of Rabbi Elazar that holds, and these are shocking words, that when we went back under the leadership of Ezra, not only was there no Chiyuv Midoy Raisa, there wasn't Kedusha to be Mechayiv Midoy Raisa, there isn't even a Chiyuv Midrabanan. Trumas Umaisves Bizman by Yesheni is mamash al derech. We learned to sugi and brachas b'negei tfilas arvis reshus kiblu alayu later that the Yidden accepted upon themselves to give Trumas Umaisves. On one hand, you can argue that's not even a midrabanan. It wasn't that the Chachamim made a gzeira. The Yidden were mekabel on themselves to give up Trumas Umaisves. On the other hand, since people can take this kiblu alayu very leniently, the Chachamim dafke therefore were machmir. And that will be the ending of today's year of explaining the Chachamim in our Mishnah, the Tanakam of Rav Shimon, that are so machmir that if you deposit your produce by a goyish shoyner, and you know that he has the same amount of his own, not only are you going to suspect that he exchanged it, you're going to say that he exchanged it. And what you have now is vaday tevel. That will be, even if you're going to hold that yesh kinyan legoy lahafkiya. So we should be very lenient. Dafke in the times of the Mishnah, Mizman by Yesheni, because of the whole thing was only kiblu alayu. Rebbe wanted to be very mach. That would be a gavaldik thing. That's the whole daf by heart. But this is beautiful. Okay, we're going to go inside now, and we're beginning in the middle of a conversation. Now, really, we're linking. There's one topic that we did not speak out. The link of the first topic with everything that we discussed is so far-fetched. I know that it's small dafim, but I know that we also have time. I'm going to read the Pnei Moshe to show a link between one topic and another topic that apparently have no linkage altogether. The Gemara is going to begin by quoting Rabbi Yeshua ben Kov Sai, a Tana, who argued with the Chachamim regarding the tahara that's going to be offered to someone who became tummy with corpse tumah. We just came off last week from Parshas Chukas. Everyone is familiar with the dinim of the paraduma, meichatos. And the rule is, the Torah says that v'hizo hatohoid al hatami, and the person who's tamei, I know it has to be on the third day and on the seventh day. There are many other steps, but there is a din of hazoas meichatos, and that brings about tahara. Question is, could you have one tired person dipping the bundle of azoid right in the meichatos and sprinkling it at the same time on various tameim, 2 or 10, or no, one-on-one only? So that's like, okay, so Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Kovsai, that kol yama yoyisi koida hapasek hazeh in Parshas Chukas. When I read a pasuk, and we're going to go later when we finish this thing up in the Pnei Moshe to see that really this pasuk was initially understood to be superfluous. The hiza hatohoid al hatamei. Now, guys, pay attention that these words are in the singular form. Tohoid, right? Tamei. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Kovzai used to say that it has to be not like Shitas Chachamim, that one can sprinkle on many. One toid can sprinkle on many tameim. He was medayik. He used to be medayik from this pasuk. No, toid echad mazal tamei echad. Has to be that way. However, once I heard the whole topic that we gave in the introduction. When I heard how they behaved regarding the storehouses in Yavne, that we already quoted by heart, just quickly repeat it. And number one, the businesses is that people would put a box of their produce in the storehouse, and there was a manager. The manager would not mark who gave which box. That's not the way the business worked. What it worked was I would bring there every day 10 boxes, and people would come to the storehouse and they would buy, and I would get the money of the boxes that I deposited. That's the way it would work. In other words, people who deposited their produce, farmers. Who were the farmers Bisman Bayesheni, especially the end of Bisman Bayesheni? Yidden and Goyim. So again, Rav Meir had this shita, which makes sense, that if you have Yidden and Goyim, and the person who bought the produce was a chaver. Now, it's sicher not good, because Roiv Yidden were Amaratzim. Question is, do I have to treat it that it came from a Jew, Demai, or do I have to presume it came from a Goy? And according to Rav Meir, just because the land belongs to the Goy, I'm chayiv midoi raisa. That's how we're beginning today. That's shitas Rav Meir. I'm chayiv midoi raisa to take off trumas u'maisres. So therefore, it's tevel. So Rav Meir says you go up to the Roiv. Guys, you remember that Roiv Jewish farmers. That then Demai Roiv Goyish farmers. The din is tevel. Rav Meir is machmer, my friends, because of Rashitas Rav Meir that ain't king in Legoy lahavkia. So there is a chiyuv midoi raisa to tithe, even though the land belongs to a goy. Rav Meir is machmer by machzal machzal. That is the shita of Rav Meir. And on this, they argue with Rav Meir, and they're so lenient. They say, afilu kol goy, even if there were 1 million people that brought today a box, all goyim, and there's only one yid that made the litoichai. The din is that if you go ahead and you buy one box, you can be lenient to say what you bought belonged to the Jew, and therefore it's only the Mai. How amazing is that? And how can we be so lenient, guys? Remember what I'm saying. We're being so lenient because our current understanding of the Chachamim is, David, that the Chachamim hold that land that's owned by Goyim completely removes its biblical obligation. It downgrades the Kedusha. That which grows really midoraisa b'chlal doesn't have to be tied. So the whole din of Trumas u'maisres is only midrabanan. The Chachamim are allowed, and they are lenient, to say as long as there is only one Jew, you can claim you got it from the Jew. Now look at the link that's going to blow your mind. So what do we see from over there? That the presence of one Jew, let's call the Jew the Tahar, somehow is mated, not mated legamri, because it's the mind. It's mated a lot of tumah. So look at the link that he's making. So therefore, one tahar can throw out many tameim. Hada amra, now because when I found out shitas chachamim, I'm going to retract and I'm going to say that toir echad mazal kamet tameim. Oy gewalt. Now, it almost sounds like if it's agadata, guys, it makes sense, right? But we're not learning agadata. Come on, what are these two things connected one with the other? So before we go on now to the Hataninon, before we do that, which will be amazing, we're going to go into the Pnei Moshe. The Pnei Moshe, we're going to read it. I know we have time. The Pnei Moshe is going to start 13 lines from the top of the Amid. That's the last few narrow lines. And we're going to learn the two Pnei Moshes, and that will mamish enlighten us to see it's not stam, a little bit of pure can remove a lot of impure. No. So he says like this. Why did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, why did he expound V'hiza hatoid alatome? So when we learned the Gemara, we said because it's in the singular. The Pnei Moshe is going to say, no, it's much more than that. Because because he came to the conclusion that this verse in Chukas was completely Yeseidu, it's completely superfluous, it's extra. Why? Because the whole the Elman says that the Ishtar dips the Ezov in the water, he's al ha'oil al kalim, or on people, right? In other words, the Torah already spoke about the act of the sprinkle. So therefore, v'hiza hatoir de basrei lamalu. I want you to know that this is a kasha the Gemara asks in Bavli, in Mesechtas Nazir, and the Gemara gives an answer. So now the Pnei Moshe is going to show you why he rejected the answer. And once he learned this braisa of the storehouses in Yavne, were kutim, really, but kutim have a din of a goy, and yet the Chachamim were so lenient, they argued with Rav Meir. That is how he needed now to accept the answer that we have in Masechtas Nazir. Now we read it inside. Same thing, in our Gemara. I'm just giving you side things. Kuti was not Kuti. They converted, but the conversion was because of fear, and it was a machlokes whether they didn't or goyim. The Gemara doesn't even mention the word kuti. I want you to know that in Yavna, the farmers around Yavna were kutim, and this whole sugi is following that. Shita says the Barafulda, but we don't have all that time. But let's go with the Penei Moshe. Now, and Rabbi Shua ben Kozvai did not want to explain this apparent Yesera Kida Darshina Bereish Perik Basra de Nazir that the Gemara there says he's a Torah Latame to he learned from that pasuk that Goyim Bechal don't become Tomei. Kol sheyesh leitara yesh leitum, and lefikach nachim that they don't have tuma v'loy tara. So that's what we learned. He's a hatoid alatame is to link tahara and tuma, and it tells you that you're only tame if you can become tame. You're only tame if you can become tahir, and therefore goyim are completely excluded from the parsha of tuma and tara. That is what this verse is teaching you. It has nothing to do with one on the other. But he did not accept it initially. Why? Should have a kashila that I don't need this verse, which is extra to be medaik. The Torah is being medaik only eaten, not goyim, because I know that from another pasuk when it says adas bnei Yisrael lemishmeres lemei nida chatosim laadas bnei Yisrael mei nida. That's the waters of chatos, the waters of the paraduma. So that's it. The Torah already said the whole waters are only shaykh to Adas B'nai Yisrael. And that's why he couldn't accept initially the answer that we have in Nasir, and that's why he darshaned it one on one. However, guys, we are in the Penei Moshe 9 lines under the Gemara, right in the middle of the medium-sized lines. This is Gaval. The Drashas Apasuk Hazem. That what Mahai Doitzara Shal Yavne, that since the Chacham and Paskin, that even if almost everyone is a goy, and there's only one Jew, that we are so lenient, and you buy one box, you get to treat it as the Mai. And the Penei Moshe says what we said. What does one thing have to do with the other? V'hai alikara the Haidina Kasha. Umay Shaycha Chiyuv the Ma'aseh Gabenachlim. B'chlal, I have a foundational kasha. What do you mean? What's the issue? What's the issue if the majority of the people are goyim? Goyim should be completely exempted. Because by Meiser it says, Ki asmaser, look at the words. B'nei Yisrael, asher yirimul Hashem. If every time God says the words B'nei Yisrael, it excludes goyim, then produce that's grown in the land of a goy should b'chlal not be a problem at all. That is what he chapped. From here, Rabbi Shua ben Kozvai learned that even though the Torah writes B'nai Yisrael, it doesn't always exclude Goyim. It's Kabbalah. That's beautiful. And therefore,
Rabbi,
one second, just to finish that. And therefore, now he is going to use the Vehiza Hatoid Alatame, not to be medayik singular on singular, but to learn from Vir that Goyim are not shaykh to corpse tuma, and therefore he's going to agree with the Chachamim that one Torah can sprinkle on many tumah. Okay, yes, Danny.
I didn't follow this, the connection between the one person sprinkling one person and the whole sugya of depositing grain by a kuti and whether it's considered Demai or Tevel.
So let me repeat the Penei Moshe one more time and then we'll go back because we have a big thing still ahead of us.
Sure, sorry.
No problem.
Also, one more question. In all these cases where we're talking about Tevel, are we talking about Tevel the way we learned it the last few days, or this is regular Tevel? Is this like the
Danny, you're confusing Demai. Tevel, we always learn Tevel.
I'm sorry. Demai. When he says Demai, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
What status of Demai are we talking about? Like where they would have to do also truma
the Gemara is going to speak about it soon, Danny. The Gemara is going to speak about it soon. Mamish. Let's get it. So coming back over here, you have a pasuk in Chukas v'hiza hatoid alatame. The Chazal generally learned that pasuk somewhere from a medayik from there that goyim are not included in corpse tumah. They can't become tamei and they don't need tara. Rabbi Shua ben Kovzvai initially rejected that because when he understood that since the Torah by Midbar Dalit, by Midbar Tes, it's probably Parshas Nasai, maybe Parshas Baloischa, when the Torah says Bnei Yisrael regarding corpse tuma. He says when God says Bnei Yisrael, it means Bnei Yisrael and not Noch. When he was learning this sugya that we're talking about, forget about the detail that we mentioned, that one, the presence of one Jew is metayed everything. Everything can be viewed as the Mai. No, it's that in the Torah uses the words Bnei Yisrael regarding Maisis. Ki asmasid Bnei Yisrael. And if Bnei Yisrael excludes Goyim altogether, always, then no ownership of a Goy, no land that's owned by a Goy should ever be chayv in giving up Maisis altogether. But we don't say that. We say that but we say that even though the Goy won't remove Maisis, but when you buy the produce, you have to remove Maisis. So now that he saw that the word Bnei Yisrael does not exclude Goyim, so now he will agree with the sugya in Nazir, that the words V'hiza hatoid alatome, that is going to be used to be mamayit nachrim, and therefore it's not available to be medayik one-on-one. It can be one-on-many. Okay. Guys, the link, let's move on right. For me, it's clear. I hope it's clear for you, but let's move on right. If not, you read the Pnei Moshe again. Now, we have a problem in our Mishnah. Now, whether the Girsa is Ditaninan or Vehotaninan is Mashma Akasha, and we will learn our Gemara that indeed we're asking Akasha. That what did we just see? We explained the Chachamim, guys, in this question in the storehouse. Why are they so lenient? Because they hold that Yesh King and La'akam La'afkiya. And therefore, the Chiv was only rabbinically. And therefore, you can say, even though you go after the majority, here you can be so lenient. Now, let's understand the Chachamim in our Mishnah. The Chachamim meaning the Tanakama of Rab Shimon. Even though we call him the Tanakama, but since it's Stam, we can call this Shitas Chachamim. It's not a Das Yachid, it's the Das Rabbi. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who redacted the Mishnah, did not give a name to it. That means that the Shitas Chachamim in our Mishnah holds that if I give a Goy one box for him to guard over, the Goy becomes my custodian. I gave him one saw of produce. My produce is completely tithe. He owns one saw of his own produce, that's Tevel. And when he gives it back to me, Rab Shimon says, the Mai. The Chachamim were more machmer. What did the Chachamim say? Vadai Tevel. Frag the Gemara, Eitzel, and our Mishnah says that if I give it by a Nachri, Kipeirois of Vadai Tevel. In other words, one by one for one, the Chachamim and our Mishnah say, Vadai Tevel. And over there, we're saying that there is 1,000 Goyim, and one Jew, we say that's the Jews. It doesn't fit. And therefore, Amar Rabbi Lazar, the only way you can explain our Mishnah is by saying that our Chachamim, the Chachamim, which is the Tanakama of Rab Shimon, they are not aligned with the Chachamim and of Meir in the topic that we began learning today in the storehouse. It cannot be aligned. That the Chachamim of our Mishnah must follow the sheet of Rav Meir that holds that Ein Kinyan Legoy Lahafkiya from Isis. Therefore, the Chachamim in our Mishnah holds that the Trumas Umaislis, Bisman by Yisheni, even if it grows by a goy, that's the initial understanding now, is something that's mechuyev to be tied midde oiraisa, and therefore you have to be more machmer. Now that's something that we prefer not to do, because what we are saying is that when the Braisas put together Stam, Shitas Chachamim, they followed one opinion. Our Mishnah, same Chachamim, they follow Shitas Rav Meir, and therefore Rabbi Yechanan argues with Rabbi Lazar. Guys, so far are we good? Danny, you good? Okay. So now Rabbi Yechanan holds no. Rav Meir is the one that holds that Ein Kinyan Legoy Lahafkiya. Rav Meir is the one that holds that produce that grows inland, from land, that is belonging to a goy. When a Jew buys it, it has to be tied midoiraisa. The Chachamim hold it only has to be tied midrabanan. And therefore the Chachamim get to be lenient in this whole way of doing business with those storehouses, that even if you only have one Jew, you can presume it was the Jews. You don't have to say it was the Goys, even though the Goys is Chayv Tevel midrabanan, but it's only midrabanan, so they can be lenient. Our Chachamim hold the same opinion. They argue with Rav Meir. The problem will be, oy bazoi, why is the Chachamim in our Mishnah so machman over Rab Shimon? That will be the kasha. That's the kasha. In other words, you're telling me that the Chachamim over here hold it's only a chiyuv midrabanan? So the Rab Shimon says the Mai. Then he was asking, whichever way you're going to learn the Mai. The Chachamim say, no, not the Mai. It's one-on-one. I have a box. The guy has a box. I gave the guy to watch my box. He gives me back one box. There's no way for me to know which one he gave back. Not bichayish. Vada, he gave me back the goys. It's the opposite of the Chachamim in the storehouses. There you have 99 from goyim. Only one Jew. You get to say it came from the goy. Why? So boy and kamei. So they asked Rabbi Yechanan, listen, Rabbi Lazar makes sense. Rabbi Lazar was his chaver student. Rabbi Lazar makes sense to argue that our Mishnah, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, everyone followed Shitas Rab Meir. My Tam, why are they so much more stringent here than in the Braisa? And this is the best answer that we have to give to people. Amalei responds Rabbi Yechanan that ka tis avon, when you grow older, ano amar l'chayin. I'll tell you when you get older. L'chayin. You're too young to hear the leniency, because he didn't want to be revealed in what we already spoke about in the introduction, because he was afraid that the people will hear the real truth. They're going to treat Trumas U'Maisers too leniently. So therefore, sometimes dafka you have to be very machmir. In the case of the storage house, they can be lenient. In this case, you have to be machmir. So the Gemara is quoting what he told the students. The students were talking very young. But now, Daf Lamed Aleph on the base, ma hava meimar lohain. What exactly did he know that he didn't want to share? Spill the beans. So here, that's the whole book that we said in the words of introduction, that there is a machlokes that we never learned until now between Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina and Rabbi Lozer. Everything we learned until now either follows Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, which is that, again, the first step everyone agrees to, which means that when the Nebuchadnezzar was kovesh, when he conquered Israel from God's people, the land lost kedusha. When we resettled it with the permission of the then Persians, Oile Bavel, Ezra, up until we're learning that wherever the Jews settled, there you have a chiyuv of Trumas U'Maisers. So holds Rabbi Lazar, but Rabbi Chanina, and the chiyuv was midoiraisa. That was the whole city. That you learned that neighbor Kesara, and it was not settled by Jews. That was the whole topic. But where it was settled by Jews then under Ezra, chayiv doiraisa. Rabbi Lazar holds that when we resettled the land, not only did it not return to its status of kedusha, and therefore there was no chiyuv doiraisa of tithing, it wasn't a typical chachamim's coming by telling you gotta midrabanan and take off Trumas U'Maisers. That did not happen. It was something that is weaker and stronger. The Jewish people themselves said, it's called Kiblu Alayim. We says, we came back to Israel, we resettled the land, we are taking upon ourselves to give Trumas U'Maisers. All right, remember we learned whether davening is doiraisa, the Rabbanan, however you'll understand the Rambam and the Ramban, right? The Nusach HaTfilah, the Zmani HaTfilah are for sure with the Rabbanan. And what do we say? We say that Shachris and Mincha was a chiyuv the Rabbanan, right? And Maidev is Rishus. That was the whole machlokes, that the whole story in Brachas Chav Zayin. But what the Tosfos tell us, that even though initially, right, Maidev is Rishus, but at some point the Jewish people took it upon themselves to daven Maidev the way they daven the other two tefillahs. That has a lot of power. But people don't understand that power. Here, we didn't even have a Rabbanan. By Maidev, at least, it was a Rishus. The Chachamim, the leadership did not come out by saying Trumas U'Maisers. The people who resettled said right away, we're resettling the land. They heard that halachically they are exempt. We are not going to be exempt. We're going to give Trumas U'Maisers. Younger people can misunderstand the power of a community's Kabbalah by being very lenient. It's only Kiblu. It's not even a Medrabanan. So every now and then, Rabbi wrote a din that's very chomer. What din is very chomer? Our din. That if I give a goy my box of produce, don't forget my box, only Kiblu alai. The goy, Tevel, Midrabanan, we're going to go with the Chachamim. Why Midrabanan? Because we're going to go that the Chachamim of our Mishnah follows the Chachamim of Rav Meir, not Rav Meir. Yesh King La'akum, when a guy owns land, he downgrades the Kedusha. That's why there's such a big mitzvah to buy land in the Holy Land from Goyim, according to the Chachamim. Because you upgrade the Kedusha to the point that you can be Machal Shabbos to sign a contract. I'm not speaking halach, I'm talking about the Gemara says. It's Ad Kedei Kach, the mitzvah. of repossessing land in Israel. It should be under the ownership of Jews. But coming back over here, so you know what we do? We say one-on-one, not maybe, not Rab Shimon, Vaday Tevel. Vaday Tevel midrabanan. But we're being very machmer. Look at those written inside. Command the Amar, because Rabbi Yechanan didn't want to tell him that Rabbi Yechanan follows the opinion that says that only may Eilehem kiblu aleim es hamaisres. Oy gewalt. Now hold on a second. If that's the case, I have a simple question, Danny. If because kiblu alayim, to make sure people take it seriously, we're very machmed, why is it that in the storehouse Braisa we're so lenient? So in the storehouse we should also be machmed. So the Marafulda answers the second one on the Amid, and he says like this: the Braisas were not written in a way that the Mishnah was written, including the fact the Braisas should more be viewed as Torah that was written for that time. The Mishnah is written Lodoides. I want to begin in middle of the Marafulda. There's actually a comment in the print. It's 12 lines from the top. Aval Rabbi b'masnisen shabal lifsoik ledoiros. Halacha, the Braisa can afford to tell you the Iker Hadin. Rabbi, in the Dafke, because you're writing the Mishnah is something forever, you have to be more Mahmud. Is Sosam Hadavar, he concealed his reason, but he wrote it, that even only Mechzal Vadai, Shalo Yakila Yoiser. We have to accept it. Just to make it clear, just to make it clear, whenever we were learning Vaday, in our Mishnah, Vaday means Vaday Tevel, not Vaday Misukonim, Vaday Tevel. Okay. Now,
because the people were more leniency, they were worried it would be
when people find out that I'm keeping something that isn't a normal rabbinic obligation,
right?
Even by Cholovakim, look how much people struggle with. Something is not even a rabbinic obligation. People accept it upon themselves. So, okay, I don't accept it upon myself.
Right.
So the Braisa, it's amazing logic. A Braisa was not written. They knew when they compiled the Braisas, it's not going to be the Torah forever. So they wrote the truth. Rabbi Dafke wrote a chumrah. Now Rabbi is paskening a chumrah, but you pasken a chumrah whenever people might think that you can be lenient. You have to sometimes go to the other extreme. That's what we're saying over here. And the Gemara is going to a little push back. We're going to go back and forth a little bit. Shmuel Barba asked on this. Listen here, guys. When it comes to the dinim of Tum and Tara, I get that. Taras, you know, guys, there's so many ma'alois. Remember that expression? There's so many higher steps in Tum and Tara. It's easier to understand such a logic that if there is a din that is not imposed by the rabbinate, certainly not by God, people accept it upon themselves. People might take it lightly. So therefore, you're dafka more machmer there. I get that by Taras. Nicha Taras lo yom aloin. Rabbi Yechanan would not spill the beans. Like if there's a kasha, why are we so strict in that case of Tum and Tara? Rabbi Yechanan says, when you'll get older, I'll tell you. They play gather Taras. It's very hard to keep Taras. Mela by Kachim, similarly, if that would have happened in a din in Kachim by sacrificial meat, the Girsa has to be Kachim. I get that. But the Gemara is asking, but why would he not tell us? In other words, we're pushing back on this whole thing. What already would have been? What great leniency could have come out? Yeah. And the Gemara says, yeah, exactly everything. All the leniencies will come out. Counters the Gemara. Commando Amar, Rabbi Yechanan is siding with Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar has this very lenient opinion that from when we were exiled from Israel until the coming of Mashiach, not only is there no Chi of Maisros Midoi Raisa anywhere, it's not even your normal Derabanan. It's a communal Kabbalah. And a Fabrengen, and we accepted a Achlot. Now, who was in that Fabrengen? Ezra. We're not. People might misunderstand the importance of it, and people might have completely not given Tumas or Maisris. That's the Gemara's answers. Command Amr, because Rabbi Yechanan is siding with the being, which is Rabbi Lazar. People might approve the entire Meister's obligation. Well, when you hear that this was a voluntary acceptance, you know something? Let me just add something to my mind. I think because of us living in a so-called democracy, maybe you were struggling with this because by yours, a democracy has a more chashivas. That's not the way the people were wired then. No one asked the people for their opinion. And if you gave your opinion, it had no impact. The whole system was milmailo lamata. Like we're saying, no, perfect. You were saying, what are you talking about? Everyone accepted it, and the Maran Fulda says, and Ezra was there. It's more important, maybe for Westerners, maybe for people that come from a democracy. This is a new thing in the world.
Actually, it's not. We live in a constitutional republic.
I stand corrected. Dan is correct. We stand in a constitutional republic, not in a democracy. But what I mean is that the laws are legislated by people that were voted in by the people. In other words, there is a certain milmata l'mayla way where the way laws get enacted. And if the majority of the people will paskin here in America that murder is okay, then murder will become okay. In other words, the people determine the law here. So, and we, when I say we, not me, the people around us value that.
People in power.
For sure, the people in power, because they're saying it's power to the people. I'm representing the people. Everyone is doing it for the people. I'm fighting for the people.
Yeah.
This is a chiddush. Kiblu alayu could have been viewed as something shvach. Rabbi Yechanan is saying, the Gemara explained, Rabbi Yechanan did not want to tell us to his Talmud, because people would hear it and they would say, I'm b'chlal not giving trumas u'maisos. Versus people, now they go to Eretz Yisrael and they buy it, they're Zajac to buy a piece of property and have a lemon tree. The joy that they have when they give a trumas u'maisos. Rabbi Shalom ben Herzl, the joy that he had from his backyard, with all brachas, the whole thing. You know what I mean? Even though it's in the Oig Malach HaBashan's land, it was the Zichr only midrabanan. So what? But you're chayiv midrabanan. You're chayiv and you make a bracha.
Meaning it was a drabanan even originally.
Correct. Actually, Danny. I want you to know we're gonna have it today or tomorrow. That listen to this logic, Danny. The lands around Eretz Yisrael, which is Rabbi Herzl's land, has a higher obligation, according to this shita of Trumas U'Maisvis, than Eretz Yisrael proper.
Why?
Because the lands around Eretz Yisrael were never chayv in Trumas U'Maisvis. It's the Chachamim, the rabbinate, decreed. So that's a typical Derabanan. Rabbinically, you're chayiv to tithe. In the Holy Land, you can't say the words with the same gist. You're chayiv midrabanan. You're not chayiv midrabanan. Kiblu alayim. Me'aleim kiblu asamaisis. Mamish.
So just to clarify, our Mishnah that we learned yesterday, that Chachamim is not this Chachamim. Is that what we're settling? That's really Reb Meir?
Danny, you got it. See, I know today was a hard day. Machloikis today between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Lazar holds that our Chachamim is b'shitas Rav Meir. Our Chachamim is very machmer, right, Danny? Our Chachamim is telling to Rab Shimon, if I give it by a custodian guy, one for one, Hebel Vadai. For sure, they hold like Rav Meir. At least the goys is chayv midoiraisa. I have a suffix doiraisa mach. Rabbi Yechanan has a chiddush. Rabbi Yechanan, he didn't even say. Rabbi Yechanan holds that our Chachamim holds, first of all, that the ownership of goyim are mafkiya. The ownership of a Jew, this man by Yesheni, never has a chiyuv to begin with. And therefore, I'm going to be very machmir. Because if people will start giving extra leniencies, which is what people do once they start, even by the Rabbanans, there's Mirsa. People, when they know what's going on behind the law, they go in the direction of least resistance. That's the way it works. Okay, go on. So Machlokes Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechanan in our Mishnah. I want to go back to your answer. According to Rabbi Lazar, Danny, our Chachamim follow Shitas Rav Meir. Stam Mishnah Rav Meir. We have been learning the whole Masechta this way. I just want it for the record. We have been learning this whole Masechta. We're not learning it wrong. That we hold that the goy owning land has nothing to do with the obligation of Trumas U'Maisos. The chiyuv is Midda Oiraisa. Because Rav Meir is also going to subscribe to Shitas Rav Yosi but Rav Chanina in this topic that we just spoke out the first time today, that, yeah, you're right, during the 70 years of Golus, there was no obligation to tithe. But when oil above will resettle the land, you're rechayev again. You're rechayev again. Midde oiraisa. And Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechanan sides with Rabbi Lazar holds. Not a chiyav d'oraisa, not even a normal chiyav d'rabbanan. Now, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah, guys, let's hop another few lines. We're not gonna go until the Mishnah because there's so much beauty. I'm gonna leave that to the beginning of tomorrow. People are gonna get confused. We have 2 more minutes. Rabbi Yirmiyah, just get another few lines. Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rabbi, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, says, Moed Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says Demai. Danny, that goes to you. So what do you mean by Demai? So he says, Mafresh ma'isroisov me halacha. Under rabbinic law, you have to separate. In other words, Demai doesn't mean you don't have to separate. Demai means you have to separate. What does the Tanakama say? Tevel, you have to separate. So what's the difference? Finally, we spoke it out many times. What do I mean? For Rab Shimon on Mafresh, you're right, I get it. Rab Shimon holds Demai means you have to separate. The Rabbanan say you have to be mafresh. So please tell me what's the difference in our Mishnah when you give to a custodian a goy and you get back. What's the difference if it's vadei tevel or demai? Ma'binayon answers the Gemara. Rab Shimon, mafresh. You have to separate. Now we're going to learn shot like the Rabbi. That's why we kept on insisting. Mafresh means that our demai in the Mishnah is not like demai everywhere. Demai means we don't know. Maybe if this is the goys, then you have to separate truma gedoyla. You have to be mafresh everything. But you charge the kohen when you give him the truma gedoyla. That's the pshat demai. Money, Isur, you have to go. Maybe he didn't. So you separated the Noitel Sadamim. And when the Chachamim, which is the Tanakama, when they hold Tevel Vadai means Mafresh Ve'eno Noitel Sadamim. Okay. And we're going to stop over here. Guys, just to know that, get ready tomorrow. We're going to make a recap. Don't get nervous. And from here until the Mishnah is Mamish Masi. I knew we're not going to go until the Mishnah. It doesn't matter because the Daf Lamed base is not that big. Whether we'll finish the Pedic tomorrow or not doesn't matter. But today, just the takeaway, the biggest takeaway from today is like, wow. Side of the link in the beginning was, remember this concept of Kiblu Ma'aleim. And so Paskin's Rabbi Yechanan, who was the leading rabbi in the Holy Land. And actually, Kiblu Aleim, just to say, Alpi Chasidus, Torah law comes from one level of Atzilus, right? And rabbinic law comes from a higher level. And the highest level is things that came from the Jewish people themselves. So Alpi Chasidus, it's not that we are, so to say, minimizing, we are maximizing. That the greatness today for a Jew to be mafresh trumas u'maises, which by the way you make a bracha for. If it's kiblu ma'aleim, it's the greatest mitzvah you can do.
It's like what it says on my end.
To be continued.